This is a video about the 1998 animated children's film Quest for Camelot, a movie I had never seen before until I started preparing for this, and I am sure that there are tons of people out there who have nostalgia for this movie, who have love for this movie. They love it. They have genuine affection for it, and I am not here to stomp on your love and nostalgia. I celebrate anybody loving any movie at all, especially animated movies. Animated movies are so impossibly hard to make. It's a miracle that any of them exist. But I don't have any nostalgia for this movie, and I wanted to take a look at it because there are examples from history where an American movie studio will make a real effort to try to get an animated studio, like a full-fledged animated studio, off the ground that can compete with Disney, and that was what Warner Brothers was trying to do in the 90s, and Quest for Camelot was its big tentpole. Here's what we can offer. Here's how we're going to compete with Walt Disney. This is going to be our Lion King, our Aladdin. And so it's fascinating to look at examples like this and see, how did they succeed? How did that go? Warner Brothers, you might remember, they used to be a major movie studio. Right now, it's getting stripped for parts. They're pulling the copper wiring out of the building to sell it off. It's about to get absorbed into the maw of whatever corporate monstrosity is going to come next. But Warner Brothers does have a long and glorious history as a movie studio, and among the major American movie studios, it's the only one that can compete with Disney when it comes to an animation legacy. Of course, the legacy it has in animation is mostly confined to the first half of the 20th century, when the Looney Tunes shorts played in movie theaters before feature films, and people everywhere loved them, adults and kids. But Warner's was never able to get like a steady theatrical animation shop off the ground. But in the 1990s, when the Disney Renaissance was going, all the studios were making a real run at trying to really invest the resources, the money, making the right hires into making movies that can compete with Disney. And so we get Quest for Camelot, a very strange object. It wants to be a Disney movie, but it doesn't have any strong convictions at all, including why it should exist at all, other than we are trying to make a Disney movie here. But yeah, I think that that's the best place to start, is a movie that is looking at what Disney was doing, or at least what it was doing 5 years ago, like in the early 90s, making a more old-fashioned sort of romantic adventure picture like Little Mermaid or Aladdin. Not so much Aladdin because it has sort of the postmodern humor, but let's think Little Mermaid, which is hearkening back to Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, but have just enough of that sort of winking modern postmodern pop cultural referential humor that can appeal to 1998's child. But this was a giant mistake, trying to copy the Disney formula. And like Warner Brothers could look to its own history to see what it should have done, because in the 40s, when Disney was the biggest animation studio going, Warner Brothers separated itself by veering in an entirely different direction than where Disney was going. Disney was making stuff for kids. Disney was making, theatrically, it was making movies like Snow White, which are for the family. And then the shorts, the Mickey Mouse shorts, they were intended for little kids. Warner Brothers embraced violence. It embraced gags that were for slightly older kids. And as a result, they appealed to adults too. That's when the Looney Tunes really came into their own, is the 1940s. So it's strange that Warner Brothers wouldn't look to that history and just try to do that again. And even weirder that at the same time, they are literally succeeding wildly on TV with Kids WB. They're making some of the greatest animated television shows of all time. But I think there's a reason for this. 1994 movie comes out called The Lion King. Biggest box office hit Disney ever had. It was the second biggest movie of all time at the box office, behind only Jurassic Park when it came out. But the thing is, the box office is only like a tiny slice of the pie. It's only a tiny slice of why that movie was so successful. Merchandising, TV shows, straight-to-video sequels, theme park attractions, Broadway shows, and I think the most surprising thing of all, one of the really secret hidden ingredients, is one of the best-selling albums of the decade of the 1990s was just the CD of the Lion King soundtrack. And so to a studio executive, if you're not trying to go for a grand slam like that, like, you're basically wasting your time. You're wasting money, or you're losing money if you're not trying to go for that. Or at least that's how they think about it. That's how they thought about it back then. That's how they continue to think about it, which is why every movie studio still insists we need franchises and we need to take the IP we already own and squeeze money out of the stone if we can. So anyway, Warner Brothers looked at what was working for Disney, tried to replicate it, hired animators away from Disney, come over, help us get this thing off the ground. And the studio hurried the project into production before it even settled on a script. The movie is supposedly based on a book called The King's DAMOSEL by Vera Chapman from the 1970s, but I think it's also just based on public domain, like free intellectual property. King Arthur. You don't have to pay anybody to use King Arthur. That's why there have been so many King Arthur movies, also so many Robin Hood movies, and why there will continue to be King Arthur and Robin Hood movies, because people know these characters, audiences know these characters, and you don't have to pay anybody to use those names. So to direct, Warner's hires Bill Croyer, the director of Fern Gully. They hire his co-director Frederik de Chau. He had mainly worked in TV animation for Disney and for Turner. Speaking of Turner, I mean, I guess I need to point out that there's a lot of like complicated mergers and acquisitions Warner Brothers was going through in the 90s. They had acquired Turner Entertainment in 1996 and inherited that studio's animation arm. That's how they come into possession of like Hanna-Barbera. But so Warner Brothers released Turner Entertainment produced animated films like Cats Don't Dance before it released Quest for Camelot. But Quest for Camelot we're talking about because it's the first in-house Warner Brothers animated feature. Except for another complication, which is Michael Jordan wants to make a Looney Tunes movie. That's kind of weird. Okay, so they remove animators from Quest for Camelot to go work on that thing. And this kind of really complicates things, forces a shutdown of Quest for Camelot, at which point Bill Croyer leaves the production. Frederik de Chau stays on as the solo director, and they are still having problems with the script. They change the centerpiece of the story from being a quest for the Holy Grail to being about a quest to retrieve King Arthur's sword. Go get that sword. Bring it back to him. Which is, yeah, that's cool. As the movie was nearing its release in 1998, the buzz was dreadful. There were anonymous quotes to the press about how poorly everything was going, how poorly the production was being run. In 1998, Jeffrey Wells wrote, quote, "It's picked up a reputation in Hollywood circles as the first all-animated, out-of-control, Waterworld-type budget buster, with a cost north of $100 million, a first for animation, and all kinds of stories about firings, backbiting, and corporate mismanagement trailing in its wake. The naysayers won't speak on the record, but there are plenty of them, passing along more or less the same dirt. It's an animated megabomb," says a screenwriter with ties to animation. End quote. Wells also went on to quote an anonymous producer from Quest for Camelot saying, quote, "There were fiefdoms at play here. The simplest thing I could say is that there were 20 people who had 20 different movies in their heads. From the top down, no one had the clarity of mind to say what this movie is. No one said anything." End quote. And yeah, you can tell that by just watching the movie. It feels like you're watching 20 different movies that are just jolting violently from movie to movie as it goes. Like it'll be a classical Disney fairy tale 1 second, and then you'll meet the fat, wisecracking comic relief characters played by celebrities. But the story, what story there is about Kaylee, who is voiced by actress Jessalyn Gilsig. Kaylee is a young woman. She wants to be a knight of the round table, like her father. But a girl can't be a knight. But she really wants it. And in fact, her very dull I Want song, which you have to have an I Want song, right? It literally just states the fact, I want to be a knight. It would be ideal if I could be a knight. That would be the perfect outcome for my life is a knight. It's kind of interesting that this movie came out like a few weeks before Mulan came out, which has a similar story of a woman who wants to enter the warrior world of men, despite all the naysayers. But very telling. Mulan has more than twice the budget of Quest for Camelot, and the Jeffrey Wells report said that Quest for Camelot cost $100 million. Absolutely not. Its reported budget is $40 million, or its official budget is $40 million, and that's exactly as expensive as it looks, which is, again, less than half of what a Disney movie cost at the time. But the budget alone, that number shows the lack of vision for the movie, because it is too expensive to be like a more modest, low-budget animated movie, like a Don Bluth movie, like a Land Before Time or An American Tail, but it's not big enough to compete with Disney. So you get the worst of all possible worlds. You get something that looks a little expensive when you glance at it, but then you see the characters move. Like, look how these characters right here are dancing in this feast to celebrate King Arthur. It just looks lazy. But yeah, they're trying to compete with Disney by doing all the things Disney does, like songs. You got to have songs. So this movie's chock full of songs. Except the Disney movies would literally start with songs. Like Little Mermaid started with Howard Ashman and Alan Menken getting together with the producers at Disney and presenting the songs. They write the songs, we finalize the songs, and then the movie is constructed around the songs. Here, there's no decisions with the music made ahead of time, and you can tell this because the characters are singing the songs, but you will not often see their lips moving. You will hear the singing like in voiceover, like it's in their imagination, and that's because the songs weren't recorded before the animation started, and that's just not how you do it. That just shows the lack of decision making that was done ahead of time. But you can forgive shoddy songs. You can skip past them in your head. There's tons of good movies with bad songs and you're just like, I don't even think about those songs. If you're watching a compelling story with like compelling characters, but you're not. And one reason animation is so hard is that like it can get away from you, if you're producing an animated movie, is because at every stage the decisions need to be right and then they all build on each other. And I think here they just started with a dreadful idea. I'm sorry, King Arthur is a boring story. Camelot is a boring place. And Kaylee, the character, is exploring the scenery of medieval England, which is a boring thing to look at. I'm sorry, England, but you are. At least when you're trying to depict a magical land. Like you really need to magic it up, but they don't. They just show England as like drab and muddy and shitty. Things get going in this story when King Arthur assembles his knights. They're all talking about how great everything's going here in Camelot. Pierce Brosnan voices the king. I'm the king. All right. The reason it's all going so well is because of his sword, Excalibur. As long as we have this sword here, we're safe. We shall all prosper. Yep. Good old Excalibur. It's a good thing nothing bad will ever happen. Oh shit. Somebody just stole it. Shit. The bad guy of the movie is played by Gary Oldman, and he owns a griffin, like an evil griffin who works for him. And the griffin just goes in and snatches Excalibur from King Arthur, and everybody's like, holy shit, that can happen? Oh, that's not good. So everything goes to hell, all because the king lost his dumb sword. And I know this is a weird comparison, but this reminded me of when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in 2020. And suddenly everybody realized, oh, things are about to get very bad in the United States. Like we're all about to lose all of our rights. All because a very sickly old lady was still on the Supreme Court and we needed her to keep being alive so that she wouldn't be replaced with a conservative. Like maybe we just shouldn't have a system like that relies on elderly women staying alive forever and swords to like not be able to be easily stolen from behind. This is a very bad comparison that I'm making. Forget I said any of this. Anyway, the griffin is flying away with the sword, flying it to take it back to Gary Oldman, but then, oops, drops the sword into the forest. And so Kaylee, our hero, she heard that the sword was dropped in the forest, so she decides, I'm going to go into that forest, I'm going to get that sword, going to bring it back to Camelot. That's the quest for Camelot. Get the sword, take it to the king. All will be good again. So she goes into the forest, and then she meets Garrett, who is a blind hermit played by Cary Elwes. And he may be blind, but he is a very good fighter. He also resents humanity for turning its back on him because humanity thinks blind people are useless. Will Kaylee be able to convince him it's worth returning to humanity, that not everybody is so mean? That's what happens. So then they run into a two-headed dragon named Devon and Cornwall, played by Eric Idle and Don Rickles. They are the genie from Aladdin smashed into the gargoyles from Hunchback of Notre Dame. And they sing a song about how they hate each other. They hate sharing a body. It does the genie and Aladdin doing Friend Like Me sequence where they're bouncing all around time, making pop cultural references that are so just obscenely out of place in this movie. Like they turn into Jason Voorhees, they turn into Elvis Presley. The magic of Aladdin and of Robin Williams is that when that happens in that movie, it doesn't feel jarring. It feels like, oh, I have been watching a movie like where this can happen. And this is a character who I believe is so immortal and unstuck from time that he would know about things like Johnny Carson and Jack Nicholson. But these are just some dumb dragons. And they know about Jason Voorhees. They know about Camp Crystal Lake. I don't buy it. Their whole bit is that they can't stand each other and that they would be better off if they had their own bodies. Will it end up that they learn the value of working together and of sharing a life and sharing an existence? Actually, no, that doesn't happen. They get their own bodies in the end. I was stunned. It's not always bad to want things. To want something different for yourself, I guess, is the message. But like this movie's 70 minutes long and it is just jogging in place to even get to 70 minutes. But eventually their heroes find Excalibur. It's in a cave that's inhabited by a CGI ogre who is asleep. And literally, this ogre looks like he's from Super Nintendo. I mean, like sometimes you'll see CGI in an animated movie in the 90s and I'll find it kind of charming and how clunky it looks. But this is just offensive at how bad it is. Look at this. Just draw some pictures. My God. They get the sword back to Arthur and he's like, hey, great, my sword. Order is restored. And he names Kaylee and Garrett co-knights of the round table. And then they have a very lazy dance to celebrate. And then the movie's over. So I like two things about this movie. Gary Oldman's character, Ruger, I think he looks great, and I think Gary Oldman is great. And he's doing the Gary Oldman thing that he did all the time in the 90s, which is play the cheesiest, hammiest villain of all. But when you got something that works, you do it. It's great. And then the second thing I like is it's something that all animated movies should do, which is in the closing credits, the characters have billing cards where you will see an image of the character on screen, and then it will name their voice actor. It will name their singing voice if there's a different singing voice from the voice actor, and then it will say the lead animator. And I think this is just a good way to show people how animation works, how animation is a form of acting, and how it's a collaborative medium between the voice actor and the animators, and obviously hundreds and hundreds of other people. But I think this is a very elegant way of showing how it's done. I like zero other things about this movie. It's a mess. It is cynical. It's lazy. It has no convictions, no motivations, no inspiration. It sucks. So that anonymous producer from Quest for Camelot that Jeffrey Wells spoke with has another quote in the article from 1998, which I really think sums up the experience of watching this movie and summed up the industry of Hollywood at the time, and honestly sums up Hollywood right now. And here's what it says, quote, "They all want to make The Lion King every time out, but the crest of the wave that The Lion King caught had been building for years. There was An American Tail, then Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then The Little Mermaid broke it open. The whole thing paid off with The Lion King. But you have to build to those things. Everybody's too hungry these days. Studios should be finding their own niches." End quote. Did you like Quest for Camelot when you were a little young person? Let me know. I want to hear from you. What did you like about it? And how mad are you at me? Thank you so much.